Hello, everyone. It's been a while since I've done one of these shooting Stardust episodes, if I'm remembering correctly, and I, of course, have a perfect memory of every single video I've ever uploaded. I think the last one I did was the beginning of 2020, so this has certainly been a little while coming. I probably would have had at least a couple other things to talk about if, something like the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake was actually out. I would have talked about that, but we're still waiting here, so that's good. That's fine, because I've got myself another remake that I can discuss. Now, it's no secret that I have at least versed myself well in the Wonder Boy and Monster World series. I did that whole video talking about them. And I specifically made a point in the video, like, oh, hey, look at this. Monster World 4 is the only game in the series that does not carry the Wonder Boy moniker, because either there's no point in adding it because Monster World is very clearly its own distinct series from the traditional Wonder Boy games, or because Asha is not a boy, so the title wouldn't make sense. And then, I don't remember how long it was. It was probably at least a month, but not too long after that video came out, we got another project in the series announced. Wonder Boy Asha in Monster World. It's like, okay, great, now you're just completely messing me up, and that's why I said at the end of the video, this shit never ends. No better proof than that. So, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think there were that many details when the game was very first announced. I think they just said, hey, it's called Wonder Boy, Asha, and Monster World. It's being developed by some core team members from Monster World 4. My first assumption was it was a sequel, because why would they bother changing the name so much if it was just a remake, and then it turned out to be a remake. It's like, okay, great, yet another remake of a Wonder Boy game. I don't even like Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, but I at least respect that it was a new game. Everything else has been a remake. But I think that was around the time that they showed off the first trailer, and what a way to immediately kill hype, because that first trailer just did not look very good. It looked rough, the 3D looked really cheap. The fact that it was being done with 3D graphics instead of the more hand-drawn 2D art that every single other modern Wonder Boy game has used, which is really just more coincidence because every single one of them has been done by a different development team. I think there were some performance issues in that trailer, just all around it looked pretty weak, and I looked at it like, okay, I'm probably just gonna skip this one. I own Monster World 4, it's fine. And time just goes on by, I'm not really thinking too much about it, and then they start showing more trailers. They say immediately, okay, we saw that people had negative opinions. We're working on it. And they showed off more trailers, and as the trailers kept coming out, I was realizing oh, this is actually looking better now. I'll just say right now, I still would have preferred if they went for that 2D art style. Dragon's Trap is just a beautiful game. But they started to add more detail into the backgrounds. They added more of a cell shading filter to it. It ran better. So it was more and more looking like it was at least going to be a worthy remake, to the point where I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll pick that up. I wasn't thinking I'll do it immediately, but I was saying yeah, I'll buy this eventually. The final tipping point was the announcement of the physical release, which, it's always nice to get a physical release. But that physical release also included the original Monster World 4 as a download. And, it's not a big thing. I already own it on the PS3, but it was nice. It's always nice to have another version as a nice bonus for buying physical. And the fact that they have a physical version, I was like, okay, this game was clearly not going to be in production for too long. It started to get really difficult to buy Dragon's Trap physically, which is why I had said, okay, I'll just buy this digitally. It goes on sale for $8. It's a shame, but that's what I'll end up doing. It isn't what I ended up doing. I happened to find the Switch version of Dragon's Trap at GameStop, actually, I will tell that story. Give me a second on that. So either way, it's okay, there's not going to be too many copies of this printed. I'll probably have to buy it pretty quick, or I'm never going to be able to get it physically. So I ended up getting it a couple weeks after it came out. No problem getting it off Amazon. Surprisingly, this game was not just selling out. I can't understand why. Can't understand why no one else seemed to be too excited about this. But before it before I decided, okay, I'll just buy it off Amazon, I went to GameStop the day it came out. I didn't realize, I think it's only available on Amazon, maybe just online stores, because it's not even listed on GameStop's website. So I went to GameStop in the hopes, like, yeah, if it's there, I'll just pick it up now. If not, I'll wait a little bit. It's not there, but I happened to find a Switch copy of Dragon's Trapper for $30, and that's a good bit of money for a game that's like 3 hours long if you don't know what you're doing. But I was like, yeah, listen, what are the chances I'm ever going to find a physical copy of this game again? Fine, I'll buy it. Knowing that I'd be spending $40 on Monster World 4, I was like, yeah, it's not that hard to justify. So it's sitting on my shelf. It is, since it's not wrapped, it was a pre-owned copy, it is currently the first Switch game I've tasted. So I finally got on that train. And it's sitting on my shelf waiting for the day I'm finally going to open that Switch I bought 2 months ago. I'll get to it. I'm playing other games. I just finished Guilty Gear 2. Clearly a much better game that was much more worthy of my time. So either way, Asha and Monster World came out. I didn't really check to see what the reception was around the time it came out. I think I checked the Metacritic score and it was somewhere in the 60 to 70 range, and most of the reviews were saying like, yeah, it's fine, but it's very much still the original Monster World 4 at its core. And that's not inherently a bad thing. I think Monster World 4 is a good game. I like Dragon's Trap better, but it's the second best entry in the series. But at the same time, playing the game again earlier this year, sort of in preparation for the remake, I was looking at it more critically and thinking, like, wow, there are a lot of elements of this game that just do not hold up that well. And you give it some slack because it's a Genesis game, but some of those elements were things that were done better in earlier games in the series. Whatever. So I went into it sort of blind as to how it was going to be. At least I knew that it's fine. I knew I'd probably at least mildly enjoy it. And I will say, not the best first impressions when I opened up the game. First of all, there's a typo on the back of the case. It's supposed to say like experience magical adventures. They transposed 2 of the letters, so it's explore magical adventures. It's like, okay, well, that's a problem. But it's not inherently a bad thing. I mean, I own the copy of Okami on the Wii that has the IGN watermark, so stuff like that can be kind of funny, especially since the limited print run, I'm sure, means that it's never going to get fixed. Then I put the disc into my PS4, and I noticed that the icon on the home screen is not properly capitalized. Like, Wonder Boy, Asha are all capitalized, but then in Monster World isn't. Like, in is fine, you wouldn't capitalize that, but Monster World is part of the title. It's a key part of the original title. It really should be capitalized. However that goes. But then I was pleasantly surprised to see that okay, well, hold on. First of all, disappointed also that the version of Monster World 4 that was included is not on the disc. It's just, here's a download code, download it. Hey, come on, I'm paying for this physical copy. I want a physical version of everything that's included. But I was pleasantly surprised to see how small the download was. Like, I know it's a Genesis game, but usually they're bloated up by the emulator. And that was like 37 megabytes in total. So I think I put the disc in. It started like installing the remake. And then while it was doing that, I went over to the download store, entered the code, and managed to completely finish downloading and installing the original game before the remake was even done installing. It's like, this is the world we live in, guys. It's not even that big a game. It's like 3-4 gigabytes. So then I boot the game up, and it starts off with like a narration from Queen Purple, like just sort of to set up the story, but it's done like a Star Wars intro, and I don't get it. Like, there's always been a little bit of sci-fi in the Monster World series, but there's really nothing that, especially not in 4, there's really nothing that justifies doing Star Wars aside from, hey, Star Wars is a thing. I don't get it. And then at the end of it, we see that they've changed the translation of Purple, and now she's Propril. And, like, God, every single other game in the series has always used Purple as its translation. Like, I understand why you might think, like, okay, that's maybe not what it's supposed to be. You could translate it either way, but I always assumed it was meant to be, like, purple. I don't know why, but that's always just the impression I got, and now it's different, and I hate it. It's far from the only issue with the translation. First of all, they didn't even have to do that much work. A lot of the dialogue is taken nearly verbatim from the official translation of the game from 2012. So they didn't have to do that much work, but I noticed several places where there were double spaces. I noticed areas where words should have been capitalized but weren't, because I guess that's a constant problem with them. I didn't really notice any typos, I don't think. Maybe one or two, but there were just all of these other issues that were bothering me so much. I just want to go up to Inen Games, I think is the English publisher. I just want to go up to them and shake them and be like, God, just give me a text dump of this script. I will fix it for you. Just give it to me. So it is what it is. That's basically all of my initial first impressions that got me down. But then the game starts. And I wasn't able to check the trophy list beforehand because, I don't know, PS4 games are weird about when you're actually allowed to look at any of the details. Like the game's fully installed. I go down, it's just like, check back soon. I don't know, but very first thing I do when I get control is walk off the cliff because you got a trophy for that in the PS3 version. And trophy popped up. I was like, hey, all right. I don't know why I got excited over that. Anyway, game gets started and it's Monster World 4. It really is basically the same game. It looks not going to say great, but it looks nice. I do like the way the game looks. I think it animates decently well. One of the initial complaints I had in the original trailer, which is just me being nitpicky, I know, but they showed Asha opening a treasure chest and she just sort of stands in front of it and it opens like a more standard thing. And I'm like, oh, where's that booty shaking? And the next trailer showed that they had fixed that and given that back. I was like, good. All right. They know what's important. And then I play the finished game and see, oh, wow, they went above and beyond. She has like 3 different chest opening animations. Every single one of them involves a booty shake in one way or another. I legitimately wonder if they saw like the complaints and they're like, okay, we can fix that. Or if they were just always planning on it, hadn't finished the animation at the time of the trailer. I don't know, but I was happy about that. I'm legitimately not sure if the game controls better. It feels like you have a little bit more control, but at the same time, a lot of it is pretty similar to the original, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just going crazy, but I feel like I had a little bit better control over it. It's probably still not like perfectly modern, but as someone who is used to the original game, I didn't have any problems adjusting. There were some areas where I had better luck. So just to get my final impression of the game out of the way first, I think Asha in Monster World is a worthy remake of Monster World 4, and I think it is today the best version of the game. But it could have been better. There are definitely improvements over the original, but not quite enough. Like Dragon's Trap, that is unequivocally, without a shadow of a doubt, a better game. Like, there is no reason, aside from historical purposes, or you really just want to play on a Master System, whatever, reasons like that. Aside from any of that, there is no reason to play the original version of Dragon's Trap. The remake is just better. Asha in Monster World is a better experience than the original game, but not as much as it could have been, aside from all those little presentation issues like the fucking text, all those typos and just misuse of whatever. It looks nice, but the 2D would have been better. They said early on that they were going to take the opportunity to add more story. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Flesh out the world a little bit more. You can do that in a remake. That's a good idea. I think they were lying because there's a new cutscene at the beginning that shows Fear Incarnate talking to the 4 wizards. And that's basically it. Every single cutscene after that plays out exactly the same as it was in the original game. The presentation of cutscenes is really weak. Like, there's not too much in terms of dynamic angles. Mouths don't move. They reuse a lot of voice clips. Asha is voiced by Fyros. I don't know how you pronounce her name. She's going to be voicing Jolene in the Stone Ocean anime adaptation. That's really all I know it from. And she doesn't talk much. She's still pretty much a silent protagonist, but she has certain voice clips. And let's just say the scene where Papelago sacrifices himself and Asha mourns over his death is a lot less impactful when the entire time you just hear this exact same voice clip of Pepe, Pepe, Pepe. Like, it's literally the exact same clip just being repeated over and over. It's really, really kind of annoying. Like, I honestly would have preferred just having no voice acting. They mostly didn't, because there's like 3 voice actors, and I think like Pharaoh how do you pronounce it, voices like 26 characters. Like, they have a female voice and a male voice, and that's basically it. That's a little bit funny. So yeah, there's not really too much different from there. All the levels play out exactly the same, so the issues you would have with, okay, like I'm trying to collect all the life drops, which you do still get a trophy for, and the game tells me there's a special bonus for doing it, but I haven't looked it up and I haven't done it yet. So if you're trying to get them all, you go past what's basically a point of no return in the dungeon. Well, there's still no real way to go back, so your only method is to like completely go through the area. Your only method is really to just go back through the area, which you're allowed to do now. Like, in the original game, you finished a dungeon, you went back to Rapadagna City, and you just couldn't go back. Now you can, but it's literally replaying the level again. Like, you start from the beginning, you go back to the end. Like, there's no like checkpoints. Like, can I go back to right to the dungeon instead of the path to it? Can I go back to this point in the dungeon? So if you're still trying to collect all the life drops, it's really recommended that you still have a guide on you. Dungeons are now all like a one interconnected room, basically, instead of being split into a lot of smaller rooms on the Genesis. And admittedly, some of them, that does make them more difficult to figure out, like just keep track of where you are. But, you know, it's just trying to make one big world. It's no big deal. And it comes with the benefit of, in the original game, any enemies wouldn't respawn so long as you were in the same room. That's still the case. And now that the dungeons are just this one big-ass room, enemies never respawn. If you've cleared out an area, you can go right back through. And, I mean, that means you can't grind anymore. But whatever. You really don't need to. Unless you are adamant about, like, trying to buy every single piece of equipment and you don't know the Magic Merchant exists. Which, to be fair, I was doubting that they brought him back at the first time, because I went all the way through Rapadagna City, which they've redesigned a little bit. It's like, I say 3D, but that just means like there's different layers of it, which does make it a little bit more difficult to find out what you're doing. And I could not find him anywhere, so I'm like, okay, maybe they might have removed him for this, because he was pretty much just there for debug stuff, seeing as he sells the debug armor. But apparently he's there in New Game, not New Game Plus, because you don't carry anything over, but if you play the game again, you can find him. So, whatever. Trying to navigate Rapadagna City is kind of a pain. Like, if you stay on the front plane, basically everything is exactly where you remember it. The castle's a little bit redesigned, but it takes a little time to get used to, but it's not that bad. The problem is whenever you're trying to do stuff in the background, because you're either walking in this back plane or the front plane, and if you're hopping across the rooftops, you're in the middle, but if you fall, then you have to walk to the front plane and then go back around. Once you're done in the back, you have to walk to the front plane to be able to get to anything, and you can only do it in these certain area, these certain one-way streets. It took me a long time to figure out that there was a path you could take, like, up and down right next to the Pepe tree. Like, I thought you had to go all the way to the right side of the town, go into the back, and go all the way to the left. That's on me, but honestly, I still would have preferred it if they just kept it entirely 2D, like the same layout as the original. Everything else is almost exactly the same. But, you know, when you're in the town buying stuff, you'll now see that you can buy multiple pieces of equipment and switch between them at any time, which is really nice. In the original game, you bought like a new sword. Well, there went your old sword. You might be able to buy it back, but maybe not. Now you buy them, they're in your inventory, and you can switch between them at any time. For the most part, for bracelets, there's absolutely no reason to do that, because those are very much a linear, this one gives you more hearts than this one. They changed armor to bracelets now, and I think that's just because It was like, okay, well, it doesn't increase your defense, so it'd be weird to call it armor. Everything still deals 1 heart of damage, no matter what. Shields, it's nice to be able to switch between, because maybe some of them have different elemental properties, and you haven't unlocked the best shield, which is protection against everything. And swords, you actually do have a reason to switch between now, because of the changes they did to the magical hit system. In the original game, magical hits were basically critical hits. An attack would deal, I think, double damage every 5th hit. Like, you could count it. It was like, okay, this is the 5th time I've hit an enemy with it. Now it'll deal more damage. They've expanded it in this game. First of all, there's a meter that fills up. And you can only do it when the meter's full. The rate at which it fills up is different between swords. Second, you have to hold down a button to activate it. And at first, I didn't like that, because I was like, okay, I liked that it was simple. Like, you hit an enemy, it dealt more damage. Now I have to try. I grew to honestly appreciate it, because it meant I wasn't wasting magical hits on really weak enemies. Like, now I can save them specifically for the strong ones or bosses. And, holding down like L2 and hitting attack really is not any more difficult. And third, the power of them is different between them. Like, to put it into perspective, there's one late game sword that has a high base power, but the magical hit is only slightly stronger. So do you prefer that, or do you prefer the other one where the base attack power is really low, but the magical hit power is obscene, and it doesn't take that long to charge up, but you're barely going to be hurting enemies until then, until you can hit them with the magical hit and just destroy them. However you want to do it, it's completely up to you. And now you can switch between them in case you make a purchase and you decide like, I'm not feeling this one. I'm going to go for the other one. And speaking of the controls, there's running is still basically exactly the same, but now the fact that you have an analog stick as well for control is nice, because it means I don't have to worry about double tapping like every single thing. Like, every time I want to start moving, I double tap to run. Now I can use the D-pad if I want to walk, the analog stick if I want to run, and it counts as running like up and down ropes. Like, you do the double tap to move faster up ropes, which is always awkward because you're just mashing up on the D-pad. Now you can just hold up on the analog stick, works fine. You can still play the game exactly as you did with the original, like button layout, like down is still shield, which worried me for a second because I'm looking in the menu, in the control customization menu, and it says like shield, it's default on like L1, but you can map it wherever you want. I'm like, oh, they made shield like its own button. That's just going to make it a little more complicated. Now, you can still press down. It still works exactly the same as the original, so that's all good. What was the last thing I want to say about controls? No, that's not really control related. Basically, it does control better. And finally, the next big the last big improvement I can say is inventory management. Like, the inventory in the original it's 8 slots, and every single thing you pick up takes up a slot. Like, you pick up a medicine to auto revive you, that's taking up a slot, and you can only have the one. Each gold bar you pick up takes up a slot, so if you forget to sell them in Rapidagna, that is burning a hole in your inventory. Medicinal herbs all take up their own slots. And it only becomes a real problem when you get to the ice pyramid, because every single area in the ice pyramid is you have to pick up 5 statues and put them in a specific place, and that fills up your inventory so fast. Like, if you pick up a couple gold bars in the dungeon, like you're going to, maybe you happen to have a medicinal herb, like, your inventory fills up fast, and it's really annoying. In this game, inventory is still 8 slots, but items stack now. Like, first of all, you're allowed to pick up more than one medicine, and they put more of them into the game. Like, you're finding them in dungeons where there's only like one place you would do that in the original. They're still all in the same place in Rapidagna. I basically was never using them. Like, I think I used 2 at the game, which is honestly more than I usually would, but I was sort of learning the game again. The So I had like 5 at the end of the game just on me. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to die. That's fine. Medicinal herb stack, gold bars stack. Basically, unless you are... Apparently, like, there's a limit to how many you can carry, which is like 9. You're never going to reach that. So long as you're really never going to have to worry about inventory space again. And you don't have to go into your inventory to use items anymore. Like, you picked up a key in the original, you go up to the lock door, you would have to pause the game, select the key, and use it. Now, you just hit triangle, it's context sensitive, it automatically uses the item you were trying to use. It's not a big deal, but it's certainly a fair bit more user-friendly. It's just a good quality of life improvement over the original. There's plenty of smaller changes to go on with, and I'm just going to sort of go by it dungeon by dungeon. The opening of the game is basically exactly the same. There's really no changes. The only two things that you really notice early on in the game are, first off, when you finish a dungeon, it gives you a total tally of this is how many life drops are in the area. In each subsection, this is where you missed them. So if you wanted to be stupid and go back through the areas, that's no problem. Like, you'll know exactly where everything you missed was, and you can get them without wasting as much time. It's a nice little feature, but the fact that it's still not recommended to go back through the areas just because it takes so much time sort of renders it moot, but I appreciate the thought. And second, this is a weird thing they did, but every time you enter an area, it tells you, like, a new song starts playing, a little thing shows up on the bottom that tells you the name of the song. And I really wish more games did that, because, like, okay, what's the name of this song that's playing? Like, for the most part, you would only know that if the game had, maybe some older games maybe some games have a sound test that tells you all of that, or you'd have to check, like, the official soundtrack if they had it. But this time it just tells you right there. So if I particularly like a song, I could just go on YouTube and be like, yeah, I know exactly what that song is called. It's a weird little thing, and honestly, it's the kind of thing that would probably be better relegated to a pause screen. But honestly, I really do wish more games did that. Alright, so you start the game off, and what is the first dungeon again? It's the Handera Volcano. To the best of my memory, it's really no different. It's still basically just breaking you in. The bosses act a bit differently. Like, the first one, I almost managed to completely... Like, it was standing still. I was just, like, jumping up and attacking it. It was rarely counterattacking. The designs of the bosses are all the same. They still go through all the same phases, but their AI is different. And sometimes that makes them easier. Sometimes that makes them harder. The Handera Volcano, I just remember being easier. Like the boss, at least. The dungeon design itself is, again, exactly the same as the original. Then you go to the Stream Sanctuary. Again, it's basically exactly the same. The fact that it's still sort of a pain in the ass to go back and refill your bucket every time. Like, it would have been nice if they put in more places to do that. The only things I really noticed that were different were the, just to fuck with older fans, the order of the torches you have to light to reveal the secret door is different. Like, I also replayed the original for comparison. In that game, it was extinguished 2 and 4. In this one, it's extinguished 2, 3, and 4. Very small change, but I was walking into the room being like, yeah, I remember what the original thing was. Like, I could totally just skip this if I wanted. I didn't try it because I'm like, yeah, I just want to go through all of it, though. I don't want to skip it. I want to see everything this game has to offer. And I found out it was different. It's like, okay. You know, it's not on the level of, like, other remakes where they really try and mess with your expectations from the original. Like, just a small thing. After that, you have the Ice Pyramid. Now, the Ice Pyramid was always the worst dungeon in the original game for a couple reasons. First of all, it filled up your inventory with those statues. Second, I always found it like a huge pain in the ass trying to, like, figure out some of the orders. Like, the first one's always a huge pain to me. Like, I never remember the order, and the hints never make sense to me. Like, it's too much to remember unless I had a piece of paper in front of me to write down all these hints to, like, map them out. I'd never be able to figure out every single time. I always look it up. I don't know if they changed the order you put them in, probably, but they definitely changed the hints. And I figured them all out on my own. Now, none of them are as easy as the second one in the original, which is match up the last letter of one to the first letter of the next one and just put them in order. They never end up like that, but the hints are much easier to follow, and they it just makes it a lot easier to finish. Now, again, the dungeon design is exactly the same. If you want to recheck the hints, you may have to take a long loop around to go back up to a top floor to be able to read the hints again. So that's the sort of thing that'd be nice to either just put into the room where you put them all down, like the last one does, or just have them like stored in a journal that you can check from the pause screen. Whatever. Second, trying to navigate the pyramids is a huge pain, just because there are all these different rooms that basically look the same. You have to go in between floors, 2 different planes, all of that. There's a map, and it's thankfully only one map that covers all 3, but you'll only get it halfway through the first pyramid. They've changed that in the remake now. You just, it's right there as soon as you walk in. There's a treasure chest right next to you. There's a sage right there. It's like, hey, have you gotten the map over there yet? It's like, okay, now you're just giving it to me right off the bat. I thank you for that. It makes going through it a lot easier, though the method is still sort of a pain. The third problem with the original was the door codes. Like in the first dungeon, you had to memorize a bunch of codes, a sequence of buttons. If you got it wrong, they'd shoot out a bunch of spears at you. And they didn't really tell you them very well. Like the red one, they'd give you the whole order. The blue one, they'd give you 3 of them and then say, figure out the last one, which literally does mean just guess. Like you got a 1 in 3 chance. Other than that, you're going to be taking some damage because the spears come in a bunch of different directions. Then white, they tell you, like, yeah, there's 4 of this one in there. Everything else, like where they go, what the other buttons are, figure it out, man. Again, just guess. And then black, there's like, it's just the exact opposite of white. Like, just swap the 2 around. That one's honestly a little bit easier. Now, that's no different in the remake, and that's something that absolutely really needed to be fixed. Like, just playing a goddamn guessing game is really not cool. But at the very least, they made putting them in a little easier. In the original, it was symbols. Like, there was like a scarab, something that looked like an eye. And you had to remember, like, that one's A, that one's B. Especially when you're playing on a PlayStation controller that doesn't have A, B, and C. It was really a pain to try and remember what the exact buttons were. Like, even once I had learned the combos and gotten them right, I would still, like, mess up re-entering them. Because I'm like, what button was this? Asha and Monster World changes it to just directional buttons. Like, they don't try and mask it at all. It's just, hey, up, left, right. That makes it a lot easier to figure out, though, again, it's no excuse for trying to, for masking it so badly in both versions. But at the very least, if you get it wrong in the remake, the spears that come by are much better. Like, some of the later ones in the original would like swap between left and right faster than you could switch, so you were basically guaranteed to take damage. In the original, it's like 3 from the left, 3 from the right. So long as you can remember that, you can easily avoid damage. That's nice. And finally, there's just Then you get into the second pyramid, where you, now the gimmick is there's a bunch of hidden doors, and the only way you could get to them was sending Propeller Goo to sniff them out. And that would literally mean picking him up, throwing him. If you crossed the screen and nothing happened, you would cross the length of the screen, throw him again, and try it. You absolutely can still play it like that, and I was worried you'd have to. No, so long as you walk by the hidden door, Propeller Goo will stop and get confused. So you don't have to break your flow, and that's good. Then the final one is then there's the final pyramid, which you have to get into by answering the Sphinx's questions. They really upped the pool of questions he asks, and some of them you just absolutely have to be talking to NPCs to know the answers to. You know, they keep some of the ones from the original, like a pyramid viewed from above is triangular, true or false. It's like, well, no, that's false. Up from above, it'd be a square. And there's still ones like that are like, do you have a gold bar with you now? Like easy ones to Either wants to just know, like, as soon as you get there. But then there's ones like, does the queen like this particular type of salad? It's like, I don't know. I haven't gone back into the room to talk to anyone since the beginning of the game. So it ends up just becoming a guessing game. Sometimes you forget the answer. So I think it probably took me like 10 tries to be able to actually pass the test, because he asks you a lot more questions too. The questions are harder. It's really just a pace killer now. Like, I mean, it was kind of bad in the original, but it's a lot worse now. Thankfully, if you get it wrong in the original, it would drop you into a bed of spikes. If you knew it was coming, you could swerve out of the way to avoid them. But then you would have to leave the screen and come back in order to be able to talk to the door again. In this one, it drops you down into like a little dungeon. There's a fountain. You wash your face. You take the elevator. The elevator spawns. You go back up, and you just try right again. So there's no threat of damage. And it was because of this I learned that fountain to wash your face was in the original. I legitimately never found it because it's in the bottom right corner of the screen. So you don't actually have to leave the screen. You can still do the same thing. I honestly didn't know that. I'm learning certain things about the original. It's good because I had to do it so many times. And I guess there was something else like for fans. Like there's a trophy. It's like first step for the fans. It's like enter the original hidden code. And I was like, what? Hidden code? I don't remember there being a code in the original. And I had to look it up. It's like, yeah, enter in this sequence of directional inputs on the title screen to unlock the original soundtrack to switch to. And the new soundtrack is great. Like, it still very much sounds pretty Genesis, but they did update the instrumentation. It doesn't really have like a new sound. Like, it still sounds very much like the original music, but it at least sounds more modern. So it's a good new soundtrack, but if you want to switch to the original, you can. You have to enter in that code. I don't know what that code was in the original, but I guess there was a code. Maybe it was for the sound test in the original. So anyway, then you finish the dungeon. The boss was nothing too special. And then you go into the final area, the Sky Temple, whatever it's called. And the Sky Temple was always sort of a pain because it started off with this carpet sequence that honestly doesn't last that long, but you can't really walk around because you have to stay on the carpet. It's not like Sonic 2 where you could still move around the screen and it would follow you. Like, no, you have to stay on the carpet. And if you fall, you have to start the section over. Now, I mean, it's still exactly the same now, but because enemies don't respawn, there's that wall of enemies toward the end that's kind of you really have to position yourself carefully to get through. Since you can't just jump on them, the momentum will carry you to your death. You can take out the one that's like that would get in your way, suicide, try it again, and now it's out of your way. And this dungeon is the one that's the most difficult to navigate now because now you don't have the rooms to separate everything. It ends up being a little bit more challenging to remember where you are, but I didn't have any trouble getting through it. I missed a lot of life drops, but I was able to get through it just fine. And it's a little bit easier now that they don't do the Sonic 2, Sonic CD hidden spring shit. Where it's like, walk over this space, and it's like, okay, now I bounce up, and now I can actually continue. Now, all the springs are right there. You can see them. You can plan in advance, like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. It just ends up being mostly the same. And then there's the final dungeon, which, first of all, you don't have to... drop back in and then warp back out to be able to visit the town one last time. Now you can just walk through the town, get all that stuff done. There was a small subplot I noticed at this point where you're getting letters all throughout the game. It's like, hey, like from your parents, like, hey, Asha, how you doing? We hear bad things are happening in the capital. Stay safe, okay? Like, oh, and your mom went to look for you. We can't find her. And then you get a letter from your grandmother, like, oh, your dad went looking after her. Like, I really don't know what's happening. And I'm like, oh, God, is there like some other subplot I don't know about? It's really just there to lead up to the fact your parents are in town in the final area. So it really doesn't mean anything. And I wish they did a little bit more with that. But then the final dungeon is exactly the same. It still does the weird, stupid shit where it's like, getting gold bars for beating each of the final boss, each of the mid bosses. It's like, what am I going to do? Like, do you expect me to warp back out of the dungeon to sell these? Like, I'm not worried about my inventory space, especially not now. I don't really need the money at this point in the game. Like, I probably had enough to be able to at least buy decent enough equipment. The game's not that hard. And you expect me to warp back out and then like go through the area I cleared out? Since you left the area, the enemies would respawn. You really still expect me to do that? Like, just, if you want to just give me money, give me money. Don't waste my time. But then you finish the game. It basically plays out exactly the same. Like to the point that the dialogue is exactly the same. And I'm like, wow, man, you really could have expanded a little bit more. Like, establish the fact that this is the same final boss from Wonder Boy and Monster World. Like, have him mention Shion. I don't know. Like, expand the story a little bit. And then they annoyed me because they still do that thing where Asha gets that new outfit during the credits. Not the whole amount during the credits. Like, she only gets it during the last shot. And it still annoys me because I'm like, now that this is a 3D game, you have the model made. Why is that not like an unlockable? Like, can I play the game again with that new outfit? I like the way that outfit looks. Maybe that's the reward for getting all the life drops. I don't know. I'll figure it out eventually because I do plan to platinum this game. It's not a super hard game to get all the trophies in, you know. There's still certain ones that are very much like, hey, get all the life drops, buy every single sword, shield, bracelet, which really wait until you get the magic merchant because you talk to him, max out your money. Now you can easily afford everything throughout the rest of the game. And then there's like a weird one, like buy 30 items from vending machines. It's like, is there, like, I understand each one sells 3 things. Are there 10 in the game? I don't even remember there being that many. Do I have to like leave areas and go back through in order to be able to use them? Like, God, like why is this a trophy? There's a couple trophies like that. Like, I mean, in terms of trophies, like, you have to be bad at the game in order to get it. Like, wash your face in the fountain. That means you had to get a question wrong. Walk off the cliff right at the beginning. There's no reason to do that except for the fact that it was a trophy in the original. And then you get the same credit sequence, the same after credit scene with the lamp genie. In the original, he's like, "Well, thank you for playing the Monster World series. This is the end, or is it? I don't know." It was basically their way of saying, like, "Yeah, we're done making these games now. Thank you for playing all of them." Now that we don't know how many more remakes they're gonna make, maybe they'll actually make a new game at some point. They changed his dialogue. First of all, he reacts to how many life drops you got through the entire game. I didn't get all of them. I got about 75%, something like that. So he was still impressed. He's like, "Wow, you got a good number of them. Let me guess, you're familiar with this game, aren't you? You probably played this back in the 16-bit days?" It's like, well, I didn't play it back then, but yes, I am familiar enough with this game. I knew where a good majority of them were. And he's like, "Well, wow, there's a great game. Is there going to be a sequel? Do you want me to know? Do you want me to tell you?" Well, I'm not going to tell you. And it's like, don't play with me. Like, let me know, is there going to be a sequel or not? I would love a new game in the Monster World 4 continuity. Just another game with Asha. Why not? If Bach got to have a bunch of games about him, why not give another one to Asha? She's more popular. And then that's the end of the game. And that's mostly that's really just how much I feel about the game as a whole. Like, it's still a good game. It's Monster World 4 as I love it. And that's also its biggest problem. It's Monster World 4 as I love it. Like, the Dragon's Trap remake is also very close to the original. Again, it's the same game, but with quality of life improvements thrown in there that make it a better experience. Now, in Dragon's Trap, it worked out better because those quality of life improvements were exactly what that game needed, and it was just so well in what it did that it's like, yes, no, this is just a better game than the original. Like, no way around it. Asha and Monster World does fix some of its issues, which is why I say it is still a better game than the original. But there were definitely other areas that still needed some fixing, like the dungeon layouts, so that they were more, you could like revisit areas in them easier instead of just being locked into one path, basically. The fact that you can revisit areas now is nice. It prevents it from just feeling like a stage-by-stage affair, but it still is. It'd be nice if it was like one big interconnected world like the older games with warp points. into the middles of areas. Actually, I don't think Dragon's Trap had warp points, but Wonder Boy and Monster World did. So take a cue from that. The visuals are nice. I like the way the game looks. I think it is bright and colorful. It looks cute and charming, but it's still not a super demanding game. I don't mean like that in terms of, basically what I'm just trying to say is it doesn't look new. Like, this looks like a game that could have existed as a downloadable game on the PS3, and it wouldn't have looked much different. So it could have stood for another visual upgrade, but I understand the team was probably pretty small. This is what you get. And I think it was a fine game, but it cost too much, man. Like, it was $40 for the physical release, and I expect to be paying a premium if I'm buying physically, but apparently it wasn't that much of one because I checked the digital store anyway. It's like $35. I'm like, no, this game is not worth $35. Like, $30 at most. I would say more around the $20 range. And the physical should have been $30, but what am I to say, like, hey, you shouldn't be making as much money from this game, you small team. I just feel like that's going to make it a harder sell for new players. Though I don't know how many of them are going to be there because Monster World's a niche series. But I can only hope sales really get people curious, because I don't expect this game to get the same word of mouth that probably Dragon's Trap did. Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom apparently does pretty dang well. Like, a lot of people love that game. I'm the odd one out when I'm like, yeah, nah, it's not that good. I didn't even finish it when I rented it, despite the fact that I have now beaten every other Monster World game. But at the very least, if you're going to buy the physical version, you get the original game. And when I saw that small file size, I was like, okay, it's probably just going to be like really bare bones. And to be fair, the emulator that M2 used for the PS3 360 does have other features. Like, you can't freely change the resolution to any, like, whatever scale you want. You can't make save states. But the emulator they used here is pretty dang good. It was developed by Steve Snake, the guy who made Kega Fusion. He's starting to do more professional stuff now with that tech. Like, I think he developed the Genesis emulator for the Polymega, and now he was contracted to make an emulator to work with Monster World 4 on PS4, Switch, PC. Oh, actually, wouldn't be PC, probably. But for these two ones. And that's nice. And it has some good features, like, you still have the full controller customization. You can change between several resolution presets. There's at least one in there that's not quite a perfect 4x3 that, like, properly squashes and stretches whatever images should have it. But it looks fine. That's the one I personally used. I didn't notice any scrolling shimmer. Maybe this game just moves at a speed where it's not an issue. Maybe I'm just not super good at noticing it. Maybe there is some amount of interpolation going on. I'm thankful I watch My Life in Gaming, so I know all this stuff. They put out a video on this remake. I should probably watch that. There are so many goddamn CRT settings. Like, it's the only filter you can apply. There's no basic smoothing filter. It's either, like, I want the game to look crisp. Like, you can sort of... No. Yeah, it's either I want the game to look crisp, or I want, like, just so many goddamn CRT filters. Like, you can change the bend at the edges. You can change the scan line depth. Like, it is really in-depth for a feature I am never going to use because I like that shit looking crisp. It runs perfectly well. I'm not super familiar with Genesis sound emulation, but it sounded basically the same that I'm used to. So it's probably at least as good as M2's sound. It's just weird to me that this is a version of the game that is currently exclusive as a download code included with physical copies of the game. Like, you can't just buy this on PSN or the Switch eShop. I imagine that has to change in the future because they did this tech. Eventually, whatever print run of this is going to run out, probably not before long, and then, hey, this version of Monster World 4 just isn't available anymore. Like, I'm sure they'll release it for like $5, $10 after a while. Because, I mean, it's a good version of the game. There's no reason to hide it. And they did skimp out on the trophies, though. Though, I was surprised to see it had a platinum trophy, Because I thought Sony had rules like games that were small enough, like you can't give them platinum trophies. Because the version of Monster World 4 that's on PS3, that doesn't have a platinum. You just get every trophy. And you don't have any real solid proof of that. This version of Monster World 4 has a platinum trophy. And that's, I don't know, like, did Sony change their rules at some point? I don't know. But they really skimped out on the actual trophies themselves. Like, I figured they would have just recycled the same ones from the PS3. But I guess they already recycled a bunch of them for the remake. So every single trophy is just a linear progression. Like, so long as you beat the game, like you don't even have to go out of your way. Like they don't have any for secret stuff. Like it is just finish the game and you will get the platinum. But they put the milestones in weird places. Like it's not, you do get a trophy for, like, okay, to use the Tower of Silence at the very beginning of the game as an example, you technically don't get a trophy for beating the dungeon. You get one for getting to the dungeon, and then you get one for getting to Rapidagnicity after the dungeon. And there's a trophy for get to each dungeon. It's like, it's not hard to get to the dungeon. And then there's trophies for finish them, but it's not hard to get to them. And then the final trophy is reach the final boss. Like, you don't have to beat it. If you are technically speaking, like from a pure completionist, I just want to get every trophy, get the platinum, and move on, you technically don't even have to beat the game. So long as you make it into the room where the final boss lays, you get the final trophy and the platinum. It's like, wow, that is... I'm not super familiar with trophies. Let me know if there are any other platinums you can get without beating the game. That sounds really interesting to me. If this is the only example, that is something else. And yes, I absolutely did play through the original version as soon as I finished the remake. Because, regardless of the problems the game has, regardless of the missed potential of the remake, Monster World 4 is still a good game. It is still a game I really enjoy. And I mean, I knew I was going to make this video, so I had sort of an obligation to play both versions, but I probably would have done it anyway. And I say that if it's a game that the instant you finish it, your next thought is, I'm going to play it again right now, that's the sign of a good game. Dragon's Trap did the same thing. I rented that game for a week. It took me like 2 days to beat it the first time. And as soon as I was done, I was like, okay, I know like where to go. I know where everything is. I know the order in which I'm supposed to do things. I'm going to play it again. I'm going to play it with Wonder Girl, which really doesn't change anything. Though I did at least try to spice it up. I put it on easy because I'm like, yeah, I just don't feel like dealing with it. Played as Wonder Girl and I played the whole thing with the original graphics and sound. You can't do that with the remake, which would have been more difficult to do. And just because they changed the presentation so much, you can't just have that toggle, and it would have made including the original version pointless. But it's still a good game. If you're interested in Monster World, I still very much recommend it. I still stand by what I said in my Wonder Boy video, that Dragon's Trap is still the best game in the series. Asha and Monster World does a respectable job closing that gap, but it does not close it entirely. But I just wouldn't really, unless you're a big fan like me, I just wouldn't recommend paying as much for Asha and Monster World as it costs. Unless you need to play this game now, or you just need to get a physical copy. I'd wait for a sale at some point. Like, wait for it to go below $20 to get it digitally. When that happens, I think it's worth it. But as is, it's good, but not good enough. And that really saddens me that this is the only Wonder Boy remake that was done by... This is the only Wonder Boy game that was done by the members of the original team that made the games. Like, Ryuichi Nishizawa was still the director of this one. And it's, not counting Monster Boy, because I'm the odd one out on that, not liking it. It's probably the worst one. That's just kind of sad. I'm hoping that this will lead to something else. Like, I'm hoping the Monkey Crunch Studios or something like that with the development studio on that. They don't have a Wikipedia page. I actually didn't Google them to see what else they've possibly done. I hope they get to continue to do work. Lizard Cube, who made Dragon's Trap, later went on to do Streets of Rage 4. So I'm hoping they get to move on to do other work, and I hope Mr. Nishizawa is able to make a new Monster Boy game, Monster World. You know, coming so soon after the news that Yuji Naka basically like comes back into the limelight, makes Balan Wonderworld, it sucks, and then he just retires entirely. Basically, we don't know if that's actually happening, but that's what it's looking like. I'm hoping that the man can continue to continue to get work. I'm hoping that now that he's like set a framework, like we revisited Monster World 4, I'm hoping he does get to make a sequel, as was sort of being teased at the end in a very roundabout and not non-committal way. Because I'd love to see further adventures of Asha. I'd love to see more Monster World games. I love these games. I'm hoping we get more out of them. And at the end of the day, I'm happy that this remake exists. That's really all I can say. I'm amazed I said as much as I did. And I'm hoping I'll have more to say about other things in the future. Come back whenever I make another one of these videos. See you then.